Hola community, welcome to Blender.Today 2023. Welcome to Blender 2023. So much is going on. It's been a few weeks, 7, 8 weeks since the last episode, and so much has happened. Like, I was going to announce that there has been like new Blender releases, but actually tomorrow, like Tuesday, tomorrow, there will be new Blender releases. So hold on to your horses. We have so much to cover today. So much that, I don't know, for example, Blender is now 29 years old. On the 2nd of January is Blender's birthday. So yeah, it is 29 years old. What else? There has been updates on Blender. Well, there is a new open movie project. Charge has been released on the 15th of December. If you haven't watched it, please go watch it, because this is it's an insane demo of what EEVEE can do in the hands of great artists here at the Blender studio. Right after the release of this film, they also released a making of video, which you should also watch, because it is a in-depth making of explanation with interviews of the people that made it. So you should also go to check out. You can find all of that in the Blender Studio YouTube channel. What else? Well, I said releases, yes. So the last time we hang out here, Blender, the last Blender release was 3.3. Now it is 3.4. But hold on, actually it's 3.4.1. So 3.4 had a number of issues that had been fixed, and now they are listed actually on the wiki page. If you go to the wiki.blender.org, under release notes, under 3.4, there is a corrected releases page with the list of all the issues that have been fixed since the release. The initial release was on December 7th, I think, and then the 20th was the fixed release. So it's always, I mean, if you really wanna like be safe, of course, releases are usually stable, but to be extra safe, that you're not going to run into crashes. Like, data is always going to be, well, not always, but let's say most of the time it's going to be fine, but you can always wait a number of weeks, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and you know that you're going to get a, hopefully not, but a bug fix release sometimes. It mainly crashes. And also, the story pencil add-on was not shipped with 3.4. and it is in 3.4.1. So just to keep it in mind. I also have an update regarding that. Also, Blender LTS releases, so updates, both 2.93 and 3.3. So 2.93.13 was released the day after of 3.4 update. So on the 21st on the 20th, actually on the same day, but the next day there has been another release. You may have missed, if you're using 2.93, and there was a release 0.12, and then there was a really bad bug, and it had to be fixed the day after. So developers working non-stop. What else? The 3.3 LTS, the latest LTS, also got an update, 3.3.2, but tomorrow, if you're using it using 3.3 and you haven't updated yet, go to wait for a day, and tomorrow get the 3.3.3 LTS, because it's gonna be updated again. And the same with 2.93. If you haven't updated yet, the 2.93.14 is gonna be available tomorrow in the you're gonna find it on social media, or go to blender.org/LTS. Okay, that is some updates. You got a whole bunch of Blenders to choose from: 3.4, 3.3, 2.93. But what happens with Blender itself? What is there to look forward to? Well, Ton went ahead and, together with the developers, put together a list of projects to look forward to in 2023. So the list goes as, well, you can read the blog post, but there are updates all over the place. Vulkan and Metal being a big part of it. So Vulkan and Metal, they're both backend systems for the what you see and for computing in Blender. So Cycles, for example, can use Metal on macOS for computing since a few releases already. But Vulkan is going to be the replacement of OpenGL, and that is undergoing. Metal is already there. Even there is a new blog post. But yeah, you can see here real-time viewport compositing, which is actually already in master, and it's no longer. Well, I'm jumping ahead. We're going to talk about it in a bit. Brush assets, the Blender apps project, the extensions platform, EEVEE Next. Yep, the next version of EEVEE. Simulation nodes, which is also undergoing. Gitia, changing the, well, if you're not a developer, then maybe this doesn't, it's not very, doesn't sound as exciting, but it is pretty exciting because it's leaving behind the Fabricator platform, which has been discontinued, and character animation, the huge project for character animation 2020 started in 2021. 2020-ish, 5. It's going to start this year, plus procedural texturing and so much more that you can read on the code blog. In the code blog, you're going to find a blog post that was published on Friday by Francesco about Metal Viewport. And you can see now that if you're using a Mac OS, if you're using a Mac, you will be extremely happy to know that without you doing anything, Blender is going to run much faster for you now. Why? Because you can choose, you have to choose actually, because by default it's still going to be using OpenGL for the viewport and for the UI, buttons and stuff. And for EEVEE, it's also going to use OpenGL. You need to go to the preferences, GPU backend, choose Metal, restart Blender, and you should be noticing speedups. How much faster? Well, it's crazy. Look at that. The blue line is OpenGL. So when Blender, when you just open Blender and hit F12 for the first time on your scene, for example, in this scene from the OpenMovie project Charge, the one I just showed you, the render time went is much faster. You can see the red line is Metal, so it went much faster. And after the first render, it also gets much faster. So in some renders more than others, for example, I think in Charge has insane amount of shaders to compute, and in that case it is quite fast. You can see EEVEE, this render is not so heavy on shaders, but still much faster. Playback, like pressing spacebar and seeing your animation play, it's so much faster. In for example, the tree creature that is seen by Daniel Bystedt, so much faster. It's like more than twice as fast, from 5 frames per second to 10 nearly 15 frames per second. And the EEVEE test went from less than 20 to actually 24 frames per second. So yes, actually now you can animate, you can play back on an M1 Max the scene of EEVEE in real time. And it even gets even better on the M1 Ultra, the one that comes with the setup with the Mac Studio. It is even like playback went from being stuck at around, what is this, 10-12 frames per second to over 60 frames per second in 1080p. That is so good to see that, and it's only gonna get better the more they work on it. But the fact that this has been done now opens so many possibilities that I don't even want to start saying, to not, start, like spoiling too much the fun. Okay, so speaking about fun stuff, let's talk about something that is not really fun, but it is happening and we need your help. We've been getting many reports of Google advertisement, people that pay Google for showing links that are fake. I mean, it's really obvious once you see it, because it says Blender download fast. We wouldn't add that on the title of the Blender.Today website. But, so people just want to download Blender, they don't even check, and they could get confused because they use fake website addresses like Blender, or like there is another one here that was using like a Blendero.net. It's kind of like the Latino version. Anyway, you get the idea. So how can you help? We really, from Blender, we can't really do much other than just report it, just the same way that you could. So if you see any of this weird stuff, please report it. Go there. I think this is here in the little arrow or something. There is a report link or fake link or something like that. If you can help, the more people report it, the better. You would think that being Blender, you could, like the Blender Foundation could ask more directly for these fake ads, but yeah, not much. Let's talk about actual fun stuff. Oh, wait, another thing that I wanted to mention. Have you ever wondered what the hell is Blender doing with all that money that it's getting from all the development fund and the donations and stuff? Well, the Blender Foundation chairman, Ton, wrote the annual report for 2021. So the 2020 is available there. The 2020, I think it's in About Blender Foundation. 2019, 2020, and the 2021 wasn't published yet. So before 2022 ended, they published the 2021, and there you can see everything, how money is spent, the projects that Blender has worked on, all the releases, everything in a nice storytelling kind of way, and the people that were hired, the people, you can really see everything. And if you like numbers, you can even see the team, how the team was back then. Nice. So yes, lots of graphics and stuff to see the Blender downloads. How many million downloads we got last year. And I think for 2022 it's gonna be even more crazy. Okay. That is all that I wanted to share for now in terms of what is Blender doing nowadays. Let's see in terms of development what is going on, and for that we need to jump into get into the pipe, and let's start. This is the getting a bit warm in here. It's let me no, it's actually really warm because I turn on all the things, the heating that was here closed. I have a door in my office, and it was closed for the longest time, so I just needed some fresh air. Cool. Let's get to it. What is new in Blender as of today? Let's start with the compositor. So in the compositor, first of all, the main thing that you're gonna see is that the real-time compositor. Oh wait, I need to turn on the dark reader. Sorry for that. There you go. The real-time compositor is no longer experimental, so we can rest assured that it's going to be part of Blender 3.5. It's actually going to be the star of Blender 3.5. I think there are other huge changes in cycles and in the geometry nodes. There's also updates, but I think the biggest change is going to be the real-time compositor. It is now enabled by it's accessible without experimental settings, which means it's going to be in 3.5, and there has been a few changes in order for that to happen. So the changes are they're all mainly good. Okay, let me go to full screen. I need to something has changed in the libraries on Linux, like the libraries that we need, so I needed to go, and I can't compile Blender anymore here. I need to update my GCC library. So yeah, what has changed? Well, the compositor now when you're in render view, the compositor has a few options. No longer is on or off. Now you can have it enabled or like disabled, enabled always, or only in the camera view. So only when you are from the camera view. Why? Because even though it is fun to see the composite results here all the time, like if I'm in the compositor and I do, I don't know, some kind of Let's do lens distortion for fun. Well, even though it is fun to have this kind of thingies, it can be confusing because there are a few nodes that depend on the position or the size of the position in the canvas, in the render canvas, or the canvas resolution or size for some reason. The option here makes it so you can pan around without the compositor, then go to the camera view and see it there, and here it will look correctly because it uses this as the size, so it should be fine. Was it clear? Did I make it? I think it is clear. That being said, there is also now support for the compositor, not only in the camera view, but the limited compositing, like the border region, so you can border render a little bit of it instead of the entire thing. That is pretty nice. And also, one of the requirements for the compositor to be enabled and no longer experimental was to give the users to notify the users when things are not going to be working as expected. For example, missing nodes, or your system maybe wouldn't support it. Well, now whenever the compositor detects, the real-time compositor detects you have a setup that might not work because of missing nodes, now you're gonna get a warning. Hey, warnings are good. Warnings are they tell you about stuff. So this is a design task that we worked on together with Dalai some time ago, and now you're gonna get actual updates, notifications, warnings. Also, if you're, for example, on macOS, it is not yet supported, but thanks to the change that I mentioned before, the metal change, it will be. I don't know if in time for the release. I think that is the plan, but the new change to metal will make it easier to support the new compositor, which is great news. Okay. What else? Well, there were a number of nodes that were missing in the compositor, and they've been added slowly over time. For example, the track position node wasn't supported. Now it is. The glare node wasn't supported. Now it is. However, it seems to be a tricky node that it is hard to get 100% same between the compositor and the CPU version and the GPU version. So what you're gonna see in the GPU version is an approximation of the CPU compositor. So they might differ. You might want to render anyway, or double check, go to the compositor in the node editor and see it using the CPU version, just to make sure that you have the perfect glare. What does work in this mode, in this node? Simple star works. Then the ghost version also seems to work. Remember, all the links that I'm sharing, you can find them on the description below, so you can read more about it, exactly how it is implemented and what works and what doesn't. Here Omar added some notes for each one of the modes, and that also covers the Strix glare mode and the variable size blur, now also supported. Although it seems like there was a bug in the CPU version, like in the original version, using the extend bounds option that adds a 2-pixel offset. So that's what happens. Maybe the original implementation has a bug, and when implemented properly, the bug is gone. But yeah, that has been fixed, so there will be a difference. And I think that is all. Yeah, I have a note about the macOS support. However, it might be turned on soon, so stay tuned for that. How's it going? How's the chat? Happy for you, hermanos. Messi, muchachos, que mira, boba. Hello. All right. time to switch topics. Let's talk UI, user interface. Well, today we have cycles, geometry node. There's a bunch of cycles news and a bunch of nodes, not only geometry nodes. So for the UI, I only have a few items I want to mention. One of them, in the viewport, you can now cancel viewport operations. What's that? Well, if you're doing like a zoom, rotate, move, now you can cancel halfway. Before, only the roll option of the viewport could be cancelled. What else? Improvements in performance and also in the general responsiveness. Have you ever run into the UI freezing when trying to list the materials in the list of materials? I run into this and it makes me want to disable like thumbnails altogether. And by looking at it, by looking at the commit here by Julian, it seems like Blender was trying to always even when the materials didn't have the preview stored, it was trying to look for them anyway, and that would freeze the UI, especially when you have a big file like in the heist production. When you see the word heist production, that is the code name of the project charge. What else? Oh, I like this. Performance. Skip expensive view button searching when drawing. So when developers say something about drawing, they talk about the user interface, is about the display, like what you see. Whatever you do in Blender, when you're moving the mouse around, the UI keeps refreshing all the time, constantly. You don't see it because it refreshes on the same place, basically, but every movement, everything that you do refreshes the UI, and this can be expensive. So this tiny little fix that Hans did improves drawing performance in the node editor slightly, where there was a bottleneck. There's another fix that I have listed on the node editor improvements, but I like it when they go and fix like UI improvements, because that affects everything and everywhere. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna list the other changes because I think I list something in the UI section, but it's not UI per se. It looks like UI, but it's actually deeper. Let's see these others first. Missing operators in the object context menu. Yep, I think it was the convert and the set origin operators were not available for the object types point cloud and the new curve object. So the one that has the sculpt mode. And now they are. So if you were missing those operators, now they are there. This is a real UI change. The pose assets context menu, and actually it goes even deeper. The pose assets context menu is a type of menu that it's dynamic. It's built on the fly depending on the selection that you have, the asset that you have selected. In this kind of menus, the shortcuts were not showing. So by reporting this issue, by the live reporting this, made it so the fix by Campbell makes it so every menu that is dynamic is now going to be able to show shortcuts, which is awesome, because it not only affects both assets, but every menu that is dynamic. Okay, and the last change that is actually related more to render than UI, but it fits because the next section is actually cycles. It's that, have you ever noticed when you have a lamp that is like a point lamp or a spot lamp, and they have like a size change, like a radius slider, but then you change to area lamp size and you see that the same setting is affecting both types of lamps. That's not great, right? I understand the color, yes, but the area size is not the same as the point radius, something different. So the simple change was to make a new option, like a new DNA setting for the for the lights that are now having their own separate setting. So if you were relying for some reason on this, like via Python or something, then have a second look, because it's no longer tied. The setting does not change. The one slider does not change two settings at the same time. Cool. All right. But it's good, right? Those decoupling changes are always welcome, such as cycles improvement. Cycles, I have a huge list there. This is huge. This is huge. Okay, so long story short, cycles would now be could now be faster and render better for area lights. Let's go into details. So the Google Summer of Code project of 2022 to improve many lights sampling, which is actually, I think it was also based on was suggested for another Google Summer of Code in the past, has been merged into master. What does it mean? Well, that when in cycles, well, usually in renderers in general, the more lights you have, the more troubles you have. More lights, more trouble, more noise, more longer renders. You don't want to have too many lights. You want to just, focus on a few: key light, rim light, a bit of a fill, and that's it. This change that it was done by Bison on this Google Summer of Code project makes it so now cycles can automatically detect when you have way too many lights and build a tree out of it, which means it should be more efficient, basically, to work with many lights. The setting is on by default. However, there is a trick here. It's actually enabled by default on new scenes, because it would actually, you can see here, for about 10 days, if you build Blender every day and you build it somewhere between the December 2nd and December 13, you might have run into the case that you open cycles, your cycles render, press F12, and it would take maybe longer to render. Why? Because now there should be, because this setting was set in automatically, and it means that it reduces noise a lot more. However, each render per sample will take longer. So actually you need less samples now to get the same amount of render noise. However, if you are, for example, rendering with, I don't know, 1,000 samples, and you leave it at 1,000 samples, it means that your render would feel like it's slower, because it will render all 1,000 samples. You know what I mean? Now, this setting, for that reason, 10 days later, Brecht made it so the setting is only enabled automatically for new scenes, when you create a new scene or when you make a new blend file that is being saved with Blender 3.5.3, which is the internal file version, but 3.5. Anyway, you can change this setting. This is available under sampling when you have cycles, of course. Under sampling, you can go to lights and then turn on or off light tree. If you don't have that, you're going to have the same setting as before, which tells cycles to either render or not a light based on a little threshold slider setting. If you turn it on, it will be automatic. There is a number of settings that have been added, though, to make this easier. So say, for example, that you have a, let's see. So you have a headphone that has a little, well, in this case, a little light, like a LED light. Maybe you want it to emit light. However, that can be expensive. What happens if you have if you have, for example, you can't see it, but something with a bunch of LED lights that you only want to make them a bit emissive, but not emit light, because as we said, more lights, more noise. Well, now there is a setting for that. You can tell the material if you want it to be calculated as a light or not, which is so cool. So if you go to, it's a new, the commit title goes as follow. Cycles, new settings, and heuristics for mesh light importance sampling. Materials now have a menu to set the emission sampling method to be either none, automatic, front, back, or front and back. So by default, it's going to be automatic. Blender will try to decide if this, Cycles will try to decide if this is worth rendering as a light or not. In the setting, yep, or wait, here, surface emission sampling by default is auto, but if you make it none, it's going to be ignored by, it's not going to be used as a light. You can still use the emission, the emission shader, so it will look like shadeless, but it's not going to contribute to the noise and all the mess. So yay for that. Makes it, you can optimize your scenes much better now. Thanks for the nice comments. I'm also glad to be here back, but I think I'm talking way too much and not going as fast enough. Okay, new change. The light sampling threshold, so the slider that I just showed you that makes it so Cycles can tell, well, can figure out if this light should be considered a light or not. Now it's going to take into account the film exposure. It could happen that you had exposure too high and it looks like the light should contribute, but Cycles wasn't taking into account. Now it is. And this is a change that is going to be night and day if you use area lights with the shape ellipse. Look at the insane difference. This commit by Weizen makes it so when you have an area light ellipse shaped with the spread option, it could happen that you could have with only like 16 samples per pixel, it would have like with the low value of spread, it would barely be visible. It would be very noisy. Like you have to render so many samples, and then the higher the spread, like the larger, it would get better, but it would be nearly like broken. It would look broken. Not anymore. Look at the difference. It's huge. Like before, almost not visible, and visible. The square shape was always working, so you could see this, but the moment you change it to ellipse, it was broken. So huge improvement. Like your render is going to look completely different if you were using this setup before. Another change. Also, now you can use spread of 0 in area lights. It wasn't supported. So it can 0 spread, completely sharp. What else? This is has a funny title. So switch from pre-tabulated 2D PMG 0 to pre-tabulated 4D Sobol. Did you get any of that? Well, what matters is that instead of being 2D, it's now a 4D. What does it mean? That this sampling now will work better when, for example, rendering something that is both out of focus and has the fourth dimension, time. So motion blurred and out of focus. This should help. This change should help rendering those objects much better. So yeah, it's a big change. The title, it's correct, but you can read on the description to get a more human friendly, mortal friendly description. Okay, and the same for light selection and light sampling, but Cycle was already doing something for it to work on it. Okay, what else? This has to do with macOS, the additional metal kernel specialization exposed through the UI. So now in the UI, you're going to have, I can't show you right now because I'm not on a Mac, I'm on Linux, so I won't be able to show you, but you can now, the kernel optimization levels now exposed, so you can play around to see what works best for you. And while we're at it, renders on Metal, on macOS, you can, are going to start and stop much faster. So if you ever press the escape key and had to press it a million times, don't do that, by the way. I used to do it. I actually do it nowadays. Canceling a render multiple times. Escape, escape, escape. You're actually making it worse. You're sending the command to cancel multiple times and they just the one is fine and wait. What else? Why am I not? Okay. DDS textures. Anybody using DDS textures? You may have noticed that when alpha is in use, the textures will look oversaturated. Like if the color was like multiplied, like super strong. Not anymore. That has been fixed. And a change. Oh, this is a bug fix on, it's a new change. Motion blur in cycles leaves bright edge on trailing end of blur. Have you ever run into this? Like sometimes you have the edge of an object. If you had like alpha, it would be the motion blur would be like fully white, like a line fully white. Well, that has been fixed by Lucas Stockner. So if you run into this, should be fixed. And last but not least, and I'm gonna go full screen so you pay attention if you're looking this on a little window. If you use cycles and use the compositor and use the shadow pass, this changes for you because it requires a manual update. For 3.5, for your files on Blender 3.5, if you're using the shadow pass, you are going to need to update your composites because the shadow pass has been removed. It wasn't, according to the developers, it was never really working properly. It just wasn't working properly. It has more issues than anything, and the shadow catcher pass is doing a better job anyway. So it has been removed, but if there is community outrage about it, please reach out like with an actual real life scenario. Developers tried to fix it, but it, according to the messages, the commit messages, but it was broken before, and therefore it wasn't really working as expected. So why keeping it? Shadow catcher would be a better option, but you have to do it manually. Blender is not going to auto connect things for you. In this case, you're going to have to do it yourself. Okay, that is all for cycles. Let's move into, wait, it's a question. Is Blender 3.5 already available? Tricky question. It is. The alpha release is available. So experimental, not ready for production, is available because it's always available. Because Blender is open source, you can always reach it, download. However, it's not stable. Well, probably it is, but it's not. Don't consider it stable because it's under development. So don't use it for production. You can play with it in builder.blender.org and download a zip file and play with it, but do not use it in production. It's planned to be released. Actually, in 2 weeks, it's supposed to go beta already. I feel like I just finished publishing 3.4 in December, and now I already have to think about 3.5. Okay, next. Let's talk about the node editor. Let's talk about the node editor. Okay, who wants this node? Has been requested forever, especially for cycles. However, it's tricky to get it in that system and for EEVEE, but it is available now in geometry nodes. Welcome, blur attribute node. You can blur attributes, like smooth them out. However, it's not the same as smooth. It is blurring. It is now available in the geometry nodes section. Simply search for blur attributes. Now you're gonna find it. You can change the domain, like float, the data type and it's going to be doing as many blur iterations as you want. Keep in mind, in the commit here, a commit by Ilya, thank you Ilya for working on this, and so many other changes that I'm going to be listing today, and then I don't manage to list. He recommends that if you need multiple blur, don't do this, don't chain them, just basically up the iteration slider. But yes, other than that, the blur node is here to stay. Let us know, what do you do with it? Are people, this was released on December 7, on the same day that 3.4 was released, so maybe it didn't get the attention it deserved on that one day. Let's see about the let's see the hashtag geometry nodes on Twitter. Not now, otherwise this will never end. It's already 6 o'clock. Okay, new node in the neighborhood, image input node. Is a very simple node. It just then has an image input, but it allows you to do things like I mean, we already have the texture, the image texture node, so now it only makes sense to have a input node type image that you can just simply connect an image and replace and have multiple with switch and stuff. So yeah, it made sense. Okay, next. In the chat, hi Pablo, I wonder what job do you do at Blender? This is my job. I'm actually getting I'm getting paid for this kind of stuff, you know, as part of my salary. I also do UI stuff and the web stuff and a bit of everything. Communication is my title, but a bit of everything. Okay, what else? There are no new nodes besides the input, image input, and the blur node. However, there is new things inside the nodes, such as the color mixing methods. There's a new color mix. It's called exclusion color. So it's similar to difference, but produces less contrast. It's something that you will find in some other software. So just to be consistent. The stored name attribute node now has a new input where you can set the selection. So you can limit the effect of the store name attribute to a selection, to an area of your nodes. Geometry nodes now support 2D vector attributes. So besides a single float and a 3D vector, which is the regular one, now there is a 2D vector attributes. This is being used right now in the store named attribute. However, it's you have to use it. You have to set it yourself. For example, if you want to use like the EEVEE, I think there is an example. Yeah, actually there is a change that could make use of this change that I just mentioned, the new 2D vector. However, it's not there. It's not done yet because it will break backward compatibility if you use it. Backward compatibility means that if you save your file with 3.5 and you open it with 3.3, Blender could crash or could just doesn't know what to do, because it tries to point to a data type that does not exist back then in 3.3. You know what I mean? Okay. But yeah, exciting, because there is a new socket type. We need a new color for it. It still has the same color as the geometry, as a regular vector, the purple one, but it is a different thing, just to make sure. The change regarding the UV map, it's that in the past, when the switch to fields was done, Blender would make a named attribute, like a hard-coded name attribute, that wasn't very flexible. Now Blender supports anonymous attributes, so has been changed now, so it should work. Cool. What else? some nodes, such as the extrude node and the split edges node, now support using the original index layer, like the original layer, which means that you can somehow mimic what the cage option does in modifiers. So, you know, when you have an object that has like subdivisions, and this is the original mesh, well, in this cage option, on cage, no cage, on cage, means that you can edit on the original position of the vertices, the index. So that functionality is now possible to copy and redo in geometry nodes, both for the split edges node and for the extrude node as well. Okay, this is a subsection of geometry node that on nodes in general. It's been oh no, actually it's probably only geometry nodes. Okay, first, everything was moved in the Shift A menu. The Shift A menu, the add menu, was getting a bit too crowded, as in it needed some organization. So introducing separators. There is now sections. Each one of the sections is sorted alphabetically, and whenever there is a new section, there will be a line or a separator between them. This also this was done not only on the top level but also on the inside of that level, which means we're going to end up with 3 level menus, something that Blender tries to avoid as much as possible. Actually, it's not very common to say this because we try to avoid it, but in this case it's better because Blender nodes, the node setup node, the everything nodes project is gonna keep growing, especially now that we're gonna have simulation nodes and all that. It's better to have things organized and maybe rely more on search for when you actually want to go and access your nodes, once you know the node name, of course. And also in 3.5, the idea, well, I think hopefully for 3.5, maybe 3.6, the idea is to implement search for nodes with more than one name. So if you're looking for the node called curve length, you could use other words like curves or long, no, distant, no, I don't know. Basically, you could have multiple names for the same node and Blender could search for those, making it more user-friendly. Okay, this organization is gonna change pretty much every tutorial out there. I hope you all agree that it makes sense, that it was a needed change, and also it would make it easier for example, before the group and layout sections, they are not actual nodes, they're just organization stuff. And they were in the same list as the rest. Also, assets, built-in assets have their own menus, and for this you need to have a better organization. So anyways, that's one thing in terms of the user interface. Another change that you're going to notice if you copy paste nodes a lot is that when you paste them, they're going to be pasted on the mouse, under the mouse position. Isn't that insane? Isn't that revolutionary? Yep. Blender used to paste them on the original position. So if you have your node set up somewhere else in the canvas of the planet, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be very easy to find your nodes. Now it is. Now you're gonna paste under your mouse, so you get to see what you're actually pasting. Isn't that great? Next change, what is it? Oh, this is do you know that when you have a setup like this, when you have a wire going right like this, and then you add, say, a node on top of it, Blender would always connect it, like connect it to whatever is there. You can, of course, then press Alt to remove, to untouch, like detach it from that link. However, it would take 2 clicks, right? If you wanted to connect and then go back, and Blender will have to recalculate everything. It's not great. So developers, Hans, made it so now you can place a node, and while this is highlighted, you can actually hold Alt and not connect it. So you can put it anywhere. If you want overlapping nodes, that's just fine. If you add a new node and you don't want it to be connected, just press Alt and you're gonna be able to do that. Isn't it that great? And the Alt key works. It makes sense because that is already the key that is used to detach. So super nice addition. Thanks, Hans. And also the attention to detail. Isn't it great? When you are transforming, the header now tells you that you can press Alt to toggle the auto attach, which is great. It would be, it would make sense probably to have it here in the status bar, but I know maybe the code for the status bar is far from ideal, or it's hard to get it right, but yeah. That would probably involve a major change in the entire transform code. So good that at least now it doesn't show I think it would show like the position of the nodes. Not really useful most of the time. Okay, next change is, oh cool, search. This is great. This is a lot of small changes to the search and the listing, the order on which the nodes and the inputs and on output sockets are listed on search. That is fantastic. I love when developers do this, and all of these changes are based on user feedback. So the more feedback you give, the better. For example, when you're using the switch node and you search for and you want to, in the switch node, you have the switch input. By default, the Boolean sockets are going to show first, because that's often what you want to use as a switch. You don't want to use a float. You don't want to use an image, a color, right? You usually want the Booleans first. So now this is going to be smarter. And in the list of sockets available, it's going to show you Booleans first. Prioritize them. It's the small things, you know? The same goes for the mix node. The weights have been tweaked, so based on feedback from Sim and Thomas, that when you link and drag, the most useful options to have, sockets to have, are the A and B sockets, to have them connected first. Then the factor socket, like the mix, the slider to mix them, and then the special color mix operations. So it makes sense, right? You usually want to mix to A and B first, then the factor maybe, and then all the color operations. It's the small tweaks, but you see, it has to be done for every node manually. So it is some monkey work to do, and yeah, takes time, but it is worth it because this will save time. What else? Oh, the same for the same concept for the named attribute exists, the exists socket. It's also going to show you, it's going to show below the attribute output in the list. This would happen automatically if we had proper multi-type sockets, but for the time being, this helps. Renaming, yeah, some changes in the UI for consistency. The transform node has been renamed to transform geometry to make it easier for new users and for existing users in general that this is a transform geometry node and not a transform vector or transform other stuff. What else? In renaming, the interpolate domain and the field.index nodes have been renamed. I think they haven't renamed before in the past. They haven't renamed. Now they're called evaluate on domain and evaluate at index. Again, for consistency and especially for new users, to make it a bit easier to understand what they actually are doing. more naming changes. This is a small one. The collection info output, now I can see it here, the collection info scene collection. I have to remember where things are now. Collection info, instead of having a collections output, it shows the instances, because that's exactly what it is. It's actually outputting instances. So good to have that clear. When applying a modifier, geometry nodes modifier, that doesn't have any mesh, Blender will give you an error. Isn't that helpful? Yes. It could happen that you could apply a mesh that has you could apply a modifier that has no meshes, and that wouldn't be very helpful. You wouldn't see the difference. You would get confused. Now it tells you, hey, something wrong. The curves and the point cloud, the new curves object and the point cloud object now are no longer going to show you in the list of modifiers the volume modifiers, the 2 volume modifiers, in order to give discoverability to, well, they never really work properly apparently, and to simplify the process and make it more of a to use geometry nodes. Not only geometry nodes as in the new geometry nodes modifier with the like that you have to make it manually, but also for Blender to include, like to integrate, to come built in with a specific node groups that are going to be much better in terms of handling volumes and easier to update as well in the future. Okay, so it's actually quite late already, and I have a whole bunch of, okay, performance in geometry nodes has been all over the place. So how much? Well, reduce socket logging. What does it mean? That Blender now doesn't need to log every socket change, and now that leads to a 15% increase when using many math nodes in an experimental soft body node setup, apparently. What else? This is huge. Invisible trees. So Blenders, nodes, when they are not connected to anything, or when some of the nodes are not connected to anything, Blender would still try to evaluate some of these nodes, apparently, even though they were not really used or they're invisible. Sometimes leading to not recalculate the entire thing, but just to give you some info about the connected socket or even the disconnected sockets, leading to huge performance issues. In some cases, even that's more than 70% in the extreme cases. So that has been changed. And the downside is that you may have to refresh if you want to see the tooltip reflect what's going on in that socket. You may have to force a refresh in order to happen. But I think that's a good trade-off for saving time most of the time whenever you don't want to look at that tooltip. The developers say that in order to, if many people complain and they want to recalculate to see all the socket tooltips, there could be an option in the UI that it would at the cost of performance. But you know what? Let us know if you run into that. What else? Performance in threading, multi-threading. So Blender, when using, for example, a lot of node groups and math nodes, now it's going to be 6% faster, because it would automatically detect if the node has to be single-threaded or multi-threaded, depending in first single thread and then detect if it's needed and then go multi-thread. I don't know what these people are doing. It's just making things faster, as in everything. They have a ton of changes in performance. You can read more on the description below, but for example, a test with 100,000 node groups invocations is now 7% faster by using context hash generation. By giving nodes an ID, like a number, like a persistent integer, Blender can perform operations that no longer have to compare names of the nodes, but just using an integer, which is much faster, about 10% faster in evaluation time, with an extreme number of math nodes. And like that, there is so much more. Maybe I should save some of that for next week. And then I have, I have a lot of changes. All right, let me see what I can cover in this week that is actually can make a big difference. I have Grease Pencil news, Sculpt, Potpourri section, and let's see. Do you want some EEVEE stuff? EEVEE performance has been improved. How much? A lot. When using mixed nodes and when playing back EEVEE, which is huge because I think every setup must have a mixed node, and playing back, it's important. How much? Well, this change by Indie Ray, Scattered Ray, nice nickname, improves animation playback performance in EEVEE for materials using mixed nodes. The socket availability was being set and reset on every evaluation of the mixed nodes, causing the graph to be marked dirty, so it has to be recalculated, and that has no longer the case. So that has been fixed. Also, the Vulkan backend was like this, the process for Vulkan has started, as mentioned in the blog post, in the code, in the Blender.Today blog post by Ton about the projects for this year. So that is also pretty exciting. And there are more changes in Grease Pencil, Sculpt, and the Potpourri section, but have to, I think, wrap it up here because otherwise it's going to be too long. One thing to mention that has to do with hardware and software and hardware, this is important. macOS, if you're using macOS, you have to upgrade your operating system if you're using 10.13. You have to update it to 10.15, which is Catalina, I believe, and it was released on 2019, I think. October 2019. Okay, so it's been a while. So maybe it's about time to update to this, which is a 3 or 4 year old system. Still, you don't need to be on the latest and greatest, but for Metal to work, you have to update. The minimum used to be 10.13. Now it's 10.15. And if you're on Linux, you have to update your GCC version from 9, which was the minimum version, to 11. And that's a good news, actually, because I'm on Fedora at home. I couldn't compile because of the GCC version. Now I can. Yay. That is all for now. I think I'm going to wrap it up here because it's been a way too long, over an hour. And I've been sharing the things that are new since November. And there are not going to be that many. Well, or maybe they are, because actually we are in the end of Beacon 1, so maybe there will be. However, it's better to keep it for next week, and we cover everything else that I missed this week. There is changes in the asset browser that I didn't get to mention, Sculpt, in Grease Pencil changes, small UI tweaks, and much more performance changes in the node editor. So I'm gonna save those for next week because we're not going to see each other in 7 weeks like last time. It's gonna be 7 days, only 7 days. Blender, how do I get those updates? Go to builder.blender.org and download the experimental again, and download the Blender 3.5 alpha. Again, experimental, do not use it on your production files. For that, use 3.4 or 3.3 LTS, which again, tomorrow there will be a new release, a new version of 3.3 and 2.93.14. However, the release candidate is here, so actually if you download this, it's gonna be pretty much the same. Not much difference in there. Okay, what else? Is the chat alive here? Yeah. Thanks everybody for the nice comments, for the nice messages. I'm also pretty happy to be back. Let's do it. Let's do this again. No, let's not do it. Let's do this again next week, about the same time, but definitely the same place, for another episode of Blender Today Live. Watch your ear holes, people. I hope it wasn't too loud. All right. Talk to you next week. I hope you have a great week. I hope you had a great start of the year. There is so much to look forward this year. The extensions platform, the Blender apps, Blender Vulkan, there's so much. I'm so excited to be back at the studio, and there is hiring. People are hiring more Blender developers that are coming here, and producer and stuff. I can't wait. For this year is gonna be nuts. All right. See you next week, same place, same time, for another Blender Today Live.